Marcus Chin stood in the marble-floored nursery of his Manhattan penthouse, watching his daughter Emma sleep. At 37, he had built a technology empire worth billions, had been featured on the cover of every major business magazine, and had spoken at conferences around the world. Yet none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the 2-year-old girl in the crib before him, and the devastating silence that surrounded her. Emma had been born deaf. The doctors had confirmed it when she was just 6 months old, after Marcus and his wife Jennifer had noticed she didn't respond to sounds. They had tried everything: cochlear implants, experimental treatments, consultations with specialists from Boston to Berlin. Some treatments showed promise. Others offered nothing but false hope and mounting medical bills that, ironically, meant nothing to a billionaire but everything to a desperate father. Then, 6 months ago, Jennifer had died in a car accident. One moment she was here, laughing and reading picture books to Emma, even though their daughter couldn't hear the words. The next, Marcus was alone, a widower trying to navigate single parenthood while running a company and managing his daughter's complex medical needs. The grief had nearly destroyed him. He had thrown himself into finding answers for Emma's condition with an obsession that worried his board of directors. He funded research laboratories, recruited the world's top audiologists, and poured millions into cutting-edge technology. Every spare moment was spent reading medical journals, consulting with experts, or holding Emma close, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. "I'll fix this, sweetheart," he would say, knowing she couldn't hear him. "Daddy will make sure you can hear the world. I promise." But nothing worked. Every treatment failed. Every hope crumbled. And with each failure, Marcus felt himself slipping further into despair. He stopped sleeping properly, living on coffee and determination. His assistant managed his calendar while he spent hours in Emma's nursery, just watching her, as if the answer might appear in her innocent, sleeping face. The house staff walked on eggshells around him. The previous 3 nannies had quit, unable to handle his exacting standards and emotional volatility. He had specific routines for Emma, insisted on updates every hour, and would sometimes appear in the nursery at 3 in the morning just to check on her. His grief and desperation had made him difficult, controlling, impossible to work for. That's when Maria Rodriguez arrived. The agency had sent her with a warning. This was her last placement option in the city. At 28, Maria had worked as a nanny and household assistant for 7 years, but recent family obligations had made her unreliable in previous positions. She needed this job desperately, and the agency had made it clear this was her final chance. Maria's first day had been 3 weeks ago. She had arrived at 7 in the morning, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a modest blue dress and carrying a worn leather bag. Marcus had interviewed her briefly, distracted and curt, barely looking at her credentials before showing her to Emma's room. "She requires constant supervision," he had said, his voice tight with exhaustion. "She has therapies 3 times a week: speech, occupational, and developmental. Her diet is specific. Her sleep schedule is precise. If anything seems wrong, even slightly unusual, you contact me immediately." Maria had simply nodded, her warm brown eyes taking in the tension in his shoulders, the dark circles under his eyes, the grief that hung on him like a heavy coat. "I understand, Mr. Chin," she had said softly. "I'll take good care of her." He had almost laughed bitterly. They all said that. But Maria seemed different somehow. There was a gentleness in her manner, a quiet confidence that didn't promise miracles, just steady presence. In the 3 weeks since, Maria had proven herself unexpectedly capable. She learned Emma's routines quickly, never complained about Marcus's midnight check-ins, and seemed genuinely devoted to the little girl. Emma, for her part, had taken to Maria in a way she hadn't with the previous nannies. She would reach for Maria in the mornings, her little hands grasping, her face lighting up with recognition. Marcus had noticed all of this from a distance, too consumed with his search for medical solutions to fully appreciate the bond forming between his daughter and the quiet, kind woman who cared for her. He was too busy chasing answers in science to see that maybe, just maybe, he was asking the wrong questions. Tonight, standing in the nursery watching Emma sleep, Marcus felt the weight of his failures pressing down on him. Tomorrow, they had an appointment with yet another specialist in Philadelphia, another expert who claimed to have insights the others had missed. He had stopped counting how many times he'd made this journey, how many waiting rooms he'd sat in, clutching Emma and hoping. He heard soft footsteps behind him and turned to see Maria in the doorway, holding a cup of tea. "I thought you might need this, Mr. Chin," she said quietly, offering him the cup. "You should try to rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Marcus took the tea, nodding his thanks. Maria moved to adjust Emma's blanket, her movements gentle and practiced. As she did, Marcus noticed something he hadn't seen before, the way Maria's hands moved when she was near Emma, forming shapes and gestures he didn't quite understand. "What are you doing?" he asked. Maria looked up, seeming to consider her words carefully. "Just talking to her in my own way." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, his phone buzzed with an urgent email from his chief technology officer. "Business crisis. Always business." He sighed, set down the tea, and headed to his office, leaving Maria with Emma. He didn't know it yet, but that simple question, "What are you doing?" would change everything. Maria watched Mr. Chin disappear down the hallway, his shoulders hunched with exhaustion, before turning her attention back to Emma. The little girl had stirred slightly, but hadn't woken. Maria smiled, gently brushing a strand of dark hair from Emma's forehead. Then, with movements that were both deliberate and natural, Maria began to sign. "Sleep well, little one," her hands said in American Sign Language. "Tomorrow is another day, and I'll be here with you." It was a secret Maria had kept for 3 weeks now, ever since her first day in the Chen household. She had mentioned it in her interview because she'd learned from experience that families of deaf children often had complicated feelings about sign language. Some embraced it. Others, like Mr. Chen, were so fixated on medical solutions that they viewed signing as giving up, as accepting defeat. But Maria knew better. She had grown up in a household where sign language was as natural as breathing. Her younger brother, Diego, had been born deaf 23 years ago. Maria had learned to sign before she could write, had interpreted for Diego throughout their childhood, and had watched him grow into a confident, successful young man who happened to be deaf, not disabled, not broken, just different. When Diego was Emma's age, their family hadn't had the resources the Chin family possessed. There were no specialists, no experimental treatments, no private therapies. Just the local deaf school, the community of signers, and the fierce love of a family determined to give Diego every opportunity to thrive. And thrive he had. He was now a graphic designer living in Brooklyn, with a girlfriend, friends, and a rich, full life. Maria had recognized the signs immediately when she'd first seen Emma, not just the medical diagnosis of deafness, but the isolation, the lack of language that should be developing at this age. Emma should be communicating by now, expressing herself, learning about the world. Instead, she was locked in silence, surrounded by people who loved her but couldn't reach her. On Maria's second day, when Mr. Chin had left for a business meeting, Maria had begun signing to Emma. Simple things at first: milk, more, sleep, play. She had expected nothing, was prepared for no response. Deaf children who had never been exposed to sign language couldn't magically understand it. But children are remarkable learners, and Emma was no exception. Within days, the little girl had begun to watch Maria's hands with intense focus. By the end of the first week, when Maria signed more during a snack, Emma had mimicked the gesture, bringing her fingertips together in a rough approximation of the sign. Maria had nearly cried. She knew what this meant. Emma's mind was hungry for language, desperate for connection. The little girl wasn't broken or limited. She just needed someone to communicate in a language she could receive. Over the following weeks, Maria had continued carefully, always when Mr. Chen wasn't present. She taught Emma signs during their private moments, mealtimes, playtime, bath time. The little girl absorbed them like a sponge. Eat, drink, sleep, mama, dada, love. The word mama had been particularly heartbreaking. Maria had shown Emma a photo of Mrs. Chen that Mr. Chen kept on the nursery shelf, then signed mama. Emma had stared at the photo, her little face thoughtful, then had carefully formed the sign herself, opening and closing her hand near her chin. Maria had held her close that day, understanding the complexity of grief and loss even in a 2-year-old heart. But it was the potential in Emma that kept Maria awake at night, wrestling with her conscience. Every day, Emma was learning, growing, developing language skills that her father didn't even know existed. And every day, Maria was keeping the secret, uncertain how to bridge the gap between what she was doing and what Mr. Chen wanted to hear. She had tried, tentatively, to mention sign language during her first week. Mr. Chen had been reviewing Emma's therapy schedule, and Maria had gently suggested, some families find sign language helpful as a bridge while pursuing other treatments. His response had been swift and sharp. Emma will hear. We're working with the best doctors in the world. She doesn't need to learn to sign. She needs to learn to hear and speak like everyone else. The words had stung, not because of their harshness, but because of the pain underneath them. Maria recognized the grief in Mr. Chen's obsession. He wasn't rejecting deafness out of prejudice, but out of loss of his wife, loss of the future he'd imagined for his daughter, loss of control in a life that had been upended by tragedy. So Maria had stayed quiet and continued her secret lessons. She told herself she was helping Emma develop crucial language skills that would benefit her regardless of whether any medical treatment ever worked. She told herself that Mr. Chen was too fragile right now to hear what she had to say. She told herself that she was protecting both father and daughter. But deep down, she knew she was running out of time. Emma was learning too much, too quickly. Soon, she would start signing spontaneously, and the truth would come out. That moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 days after Marcus had stood in Emma's nursery wondering what Maria's hand movements meant. Maria was in the kitchen preparing Emma's snack when the little girl, playing in her high chair, suddenly began signing more repeatedly, then pointed to the cabinet where the crackers were kept. Maria's heart stopped. They weren't alone. Mr. Chen's mother, Patricia Chen, was sitting at the kitchen island, having stopped by unexpectedly for a visit. The elegant woman in her 60s was watching her granddaughter with confused fascination. "What is she doing with her hands?" Patricia asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. Maria froze, the box of crackers halfway out of the cabinet. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading. She could lie, deflect, pretend it was nothing. Or she could tell the truth and face whatever consequences came. She looked at Emma, who was still signing more, with increasing enthusiasm, her little face expectant and joyful. In that moment, Seeing the light in the child's eyes, the communication happening, the language developing, Maria made her choice. "She's signing," Maria said quietly, setting down the crackers. "She's asking for more crackers in American Sign Language." Patricia's eyes widened. "She's doing what?
How?
When did? Does Marcus know about this?" "No, ma'am," Maria admitted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "He doesn't know. But Emma, she's been learning. She's been learning for 3 weeks, and Mrs. Chun, she's brilliant. She understands so much already." Patricia stood, her expression unreadable. "My son needs to know about this. Right now." Maria nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, ma'am. He does." 15 minutes later, Marcus Chin walked through the front door, called home by his mother's urgent phone call. He found the three of them in the living room, his mother, Maria, and Emma. His daughter was on Maria's lap, and both of them seemed nervous. "Someone want to tell me what's going on?" Marcus asked, his executive persona firmly in place, his voice controlled but tense. Patricia gestured to Maria. "I think you should let Maria explain." Marcus turned to the young woman, noticing for the first time how she was holding Emma protectively, how Emma seemed completely comfortable in her arms. "Well," Maria took a deep breath, and Emma, sensing tension, curled closer to her. "Mr. Chun, I need to tell you something about Emma. Something important that I should have told you from the beginning." Marcus felt his chest tighten. Medical emergency. It had to be. Something was wrong with Emma, something the doctors had missed. He crossed the room in 3 strides, reaching for his daughter, but Maria's next words stopped him cold. "Emma can communicate, Mr. Chen. She's been communicating with me for 3 weeks. Not through hearing or speaking, but through sign language." The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus stared at Maria, certain he had misheard. "What did you say?" Maria gently set Emma down on the plush carpet, where the little girl immediately picked up her favorite stuffed rabbit. Then Maria stood, facing Marcus directly, her warm brown eyes meeting his. "I've been teaching Emma American Sign Language," Maria said, her voice quiet but firm. "My younger brother is deaf. I grew up signing. When I started working here, I could see that Emma was desperate for language, for a way to express herself. So I started signing with her and Mr. Chen. She's learned so much. She knows over 30 signs now. She can tell me when she's hungry, when she's tired, when she wants to play. She can say, 'I love you.'" Marcus felt the room tilt. This couldn't be real. "You've been teaching my daughter behind my back? Without my permission?" "Yes," Maria admitted, not flinching from his anger. "And I was wrong not to tell you sooner. I know that. But I also know that Emma needs language, and she needs it now. Her brain is developing, and every day without communication is a day she falls further behind developmentally." "She doesn't need sign language," Marcus said, his voice rising. "She needs to hear. We have another specialist appointment this week, new technology that could help her hear, maybe," Maria interrupted gently. "Maybe. But even if it does, it won't be immediate. And in the meantime, she's 2 years old with no way to tell you what she needs, what she feels, what she thinks. That's not fair to her, Mr. Chin. Don't tell me what's fair for my daughter." Marcus's control snapped. "You have no right. I hired you to care for her, not to make medical decisions, not to decide what's best for her." Patricia's voice cut through the tension. "Marcus, stop. Look at your daughter." Marcus turned to where his mother was pointing. Emma was standing now, looking up at the arguing adults with wide eyes. Then her small hands began to move. Maria's voice was soft. "She's asking what's wrong. She wants to know if you're upset with her." Marcus stared at his daughter's moving hands. This language he didn't understand. This secret world she'd been living in while he'd been chasing medical miracles. "Show me," he said hoarsely. "Show me what she's saying." Maria knelt beside Emma, then demonstrated the sign slowly. The sign she made here, she touched her chest, then swept her hand down, means what's wrong, or what's happening. And this one, she pointed to her own chest, then made a worried expression. She's asking if you're upset. Emma was watching her father's face, trying to read his emotions. Then she toddled over to him, her little arms reaching up. Marcus picked her up automatically, and Emma's small hands came to rest on his cheeks, her eyes searching his. Then she signed something, her movements deliberate and careful. "What did she say?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Maria's eyes were wet. She said, "Dada love." "She's asking if you still love her." The words shattered something in Marcus's chest. He clutched Emma to him, feeling her small body against his, feeling her hands pat his back in comfort. "Of course I love you," he whispered into her hair. "Of course I do, sweetheart. Always. Forever." But she couldn't hear him. His words meant nothing. His whispered promises, his late-night reassurances, all the things he'd said to her over 2 years, she had never heard any of them. Patricia moved closer, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "Marcus, honey, I think you need to listen to what Maria has to say. Really listen." Marcus nodded slowly, still holding Emma. He moved to the couch, sitting with his daughter on his lap, while Maria pulled up a chair across from him. Patricia sat beside her son, a quiet presence of support. "Tell me everything," Marcus said. "From the beginning."
So Maria did.
She told him about her brother Diego, about growing up in a signing household, about watching Diego develop into a happy, successful person. She told him about recognizing the hunger for language in Emma's eyes, about making the decision to start signing with her. "I know I should have told you immediately," Maria said. "I should have asked permission. But Mr. Chun, you were so focused on medical solutions, and I was afraid you'd say no." And I could see Emma struggling, could see how desperately she needed language. "How much can she understand?" Marcus asked, watching Emma play with his tie, oblivious to the conversation happening above her. "More than you'd think," Maria said. "She knows signs for all her basic needs: food, drink, sleep, pain, play. She knows family signs: mama, dada, grandma. She can sign emotions: happy, sad, scared, love. She's starting to combine signs to make simple sentences. For instance, this morning she signed Emma eat more when she wanted second helpings of breakfast." Marcus felt overwhelmed. Can you show me? Can you show me how to talk to her?" Maria's face brightened. "Of course. The alphabet and basic signs are easy to learn. The grammar is different from English, but we can start with simple things." She thought for a moment, then demonstrated. "This is the sign for I love you." She extended her thumb, index finger and pinky while keeping her middle and ring fingers down. It looked like a combination of the letters I, L, and Y. "It's used in the deaf community all the time," Maria explained. "Can you try it?" Marcus formed the sign awkwardly, his business hand and used to these precise movements. "Like this?" "Perfect," Maria said. "Now, why don't you show Emma?" Marcus turned to his daughter and made the sign. Emma's face lit up with recognition. She made the sign back, then threw her arms around his neck. Marcus felt tears on his cheeks. It was such a simple thing, 3 fingers extended, but it was communication. Real, actual communication with his daughter. For the first time in her life, he had told her he loved her, and she had understood and responded. "There's so much more she can learn," Maria said softly. "With proper support, a teacher who specializes in deaf education, exposure to other signing children, books, and resources, she could be completely fluent by the time she's 4. She could have full, complex conversations, could express abstract ideas, could tell stories and jokes and... But what about her hearing? Marcus interrupted. What about the treatments? If she becomes fluent in sign language, if she's comfortable in that world, will she lose motivation to learn to hear and speak? Maria chose her words carefully. Mr. Chen, I can't answer that. I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you what I've learned from my brother's experience and from the deaf community. Sign language doesn't limit deaf children, it frees them. Many deaf children who sign also learn to speak and lip read if they want to, and if their hearing allows it. It's not either or. It's both and. Patricia spoke up. Marcus, your father, and we should have told you this years ago. When Jennifer was pregnant, we looked into adoption. There was a beautiful deaf little boy, about 3 years old. We considered it seriously, learned about the deaf community, visited deaf schools. We decided not to pursue it for various reasons, but what we learned stayed with me. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The deaf community isn't disabled, Marcus. They're different. They have their own language, their own culture, their own way of experiencing the world. If Emma is deaf, truly and permanently deaf, then maybe instead of trying to fix her, we should be trying to give her the tools to thrive as she is. Marcus felt like his entire worldview was shifting. For 2 years, he had seen Emma's deafness as a problem to be solved, a condition to be cured. He had poured his grief over Jennifer's death into this quest for medical solutions, convinced that if he could just fix Emma's hearing, he could somehow make their broken family whole again. But looking at his daughter now, watching her sign "I love you" back to him with perfect clarity and joy, he wondered if he'd been wrong. Not about pursuing medical options, those were still worth exploring, but about what Emma needed most. She didn't need to hear to be loved.
She didn't need to speak to be understood.
What she needed was communication, connection, language, however that came. Teach me, Marcus said suddenly, looking at Maria with new intensity. Teach me everything. I want to learn to sign. I want to talk to my daughter. Maria's smile was radiant. It would be my honor, Mr. Chen. And Maria? Marcus added, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you. Thank you for seeing what Emma needed when I was too blind to see it myself. I'm sorry You don't have to apologize, Maria said gently. You were grieving, and you were trying to help her the only way you knew how. Now you have another way. That's what matters. Emma, bored with the adult conversation, had climbed down from Marcus's lap and was toddling over to her toy box. She pulled out a board book and brought it to Maria, signing something. She wants me to read to her, Maria translated. Should I? Marcus nodded, then caught himself.
Wait.
How do you read to her if she can't hear? Like this. Maria took the book, opened it, and began pointing to the pictures while signing the story. Emma watched, rapt, occasionally signing a word she recognized. Dog, ball, baby. Marcus watched them together. This young woman who had come into their lives just 3 weeks ago and his daughter who had been locked in silence for 2 years. And he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope for a cure. Not hope for a medical miracle. Just hope that Emma would be okay, that she would have language and love and connection, that she would grow up knowing she was valued exactly as she was. It wasn't the hope he'd been searching for, but maybe, he thought, it was the hope he needed. The following weeks transformed the Chun household in ways Marcus could never have anticipated. His entire world, so carefully constructed around board meetings and business deals and medical appointments, suddenly expanded to include silent breakfasts where hands spoke louder than words, and evenings spent practicing finger shapes until his hands cramped. Maria became not just Emma's caregiver, but the family's bridge to a world they'd never known existed. She started coming an hour early each morning to give Marcus sign language lessons before Emma woke up. They'd sit at the kitchen table, steaming coffee cups between them, while Maria patiently demonstrated signs and corrected his clumsy attempts. "Your hand shape is good," Maria would say, "but the movement needs to be smoother." Sign language isn't just about the shapes. It's about the flow, the rhythm. Think of it like music for the eyes instead of the ears. Marcus, who had built his fortune on precision and attention to detail, approached sign language the way he approached everything, with intense focus and determination. He bought books, downloaded apps, watched videos online. But it was the practical lessons with Maria that truly taught him, because she didn't just show him signs, she showed him how to connect. "Don't just sign at Emma," Maria instructed one morning. "Sign with her. Make eye contact. Let her see your face, your expressions." In sign language, your face is part of the grammar. A raised eyebrow can turn a statement into a question. A frown can change the whole meaning of a sentence. Marcus had never thought about communication this way. In his business world, words were tools, precise, efficient, measurable. But sign language required his whole body, his whole attention. He couldn't sign while checking his phone or glancing at his laptop. He had to be present, fully present, in a way he hadn't been since Jennifer died. Emma, for her part, blossomed under her father's newfound attention. The first time Marcus managed a full sign conversation with her, asking about her day, understanding her responses, making her laugh with a silly sign he'd practiced, she had thrown herself into his arms with such joy that Marcus had to excuse himself to his office to cry. Patricia visited more often now, insisting that Maria teach her too. "I'm 62 years old," she announced, "and if I can learn to use an iPhone, I can learn to talk to my granddaughter properly." The three of them, Marcus, Patricia, and Maria, became students together, sometimes fumbling through conversations with Emma where they had to fingerspell words they didn't know signs for, sometimes laughing at their mistakes, sometimes moved to tears by the simple miracle of understanding and being understood. But it wasn't all smooth progress. Marcus still struggled with his emotions, still wrestled with grief and guilt. 2 weeks into their new communication journey, he had a difficult conversation with Maria one evening after Emma was asleep. "I keep thinking," he said, staring into his untouched whiskey glass, "about all the time I wasted. 2 years, Maria. 2 years where I was so busy trying to fix her that I never just talked to her." They were in his study, where Maria had come to return a book about deaf culture that Marcus had asked to borrow. She sat down across from him, her expression compassionate but direct. "You were doing what you thought was right," Maria said. "You were trying to help her in the only way you knew how." "But I was wrong," Marcus said bitterly. "I was so wrong. And Jennifer, God, Jennifer tried to tell me. She said once, about 6 months before she died, that maybe we should learn some sign language just in case. And I shut her down. I told her we couldn't give up hope, couldn't accept defeat." "Mr. Chin." "Marcus," he corrected automatically.
Please.
"Your family now, not just an employee." Maria smiled slightly. "Marcus, then. You need to forgive yourself. You made decisions based on love, even if they weren't perfect decisions. Emma knows you love her. That's what matters." "Does she?" Marcus asked. "How can she know when I spent 2 years not even being able to tell her properly?" "Children don't need perfect parents," Maria said gently. "They need present ones. And you're present now. You're learning, growing, changing. That's what she'll remember." Marcus thought about this, rolling the whiskey glass between his palms. "Tell me about your brother," he said suddenly. "Diego. You've mentioned him, but tell me what his life is really like. The truth, not the inspirational version." Maria considered the question carefully. Diego's life is good, she said. He has friends, a career he loves, a girlfriend he adores. He goes to concerts. Yes, deaf people can enjoy concerts through the vibrations and the visual performance. He travels, he has hobbies, he's planning to propose to his girlfriend next month. But, Marcus prompted, hearing the unspoken qualification. But it's not always easy, Maria admitted. He faces discrimination sometimes. People who think he's not as intelligent because he doesn't speak. Businesses, without proper accommodations. Medical professionals who talk to me instead of him, as if he can't understand. Dating was hard before he met Carmen. Lots of hearing women wouldn't give him a chance. She paused, then continued. And our parents, they struggled at first, too. My mother especially. She grieved the son she thought she'd have, the one who would call her on the phone, the one who would sing in the church choir like she did. It took her time to accept that Diego was perfect as he was, just different from what she'd imagined. How did she get past it? Marcus asked. She joined a parent support group for families with deaf children, Maria said. She met other parents, both hearing and deaf. She learned from deaf adults about their experiences. And mostly, she spent time with Diego, really paying attention to who he was, not who she wished he'd be. She fell in love with her actual son, not her imaginary one. Marcus felt those words like a punch. His imaginary daughter, the one who would hear him read bedtime stories, who would say, "I love you, Daddy," out loud, who would grow up just like any other hearing child. He'd been grieving her for 2 years, mourning a child who had never existed while the real Emma grew and changed right in front of him. I need to do that, he said quietly. I need to fall in love with who Emma actually is. You already are, Maria said. I see it every time you practice with her, every time you celebrate when she teaches you a new sign. You're getting there, Marcus. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Marcus asked, Will you help me find a deaf teacher for Emma? Someone who can give her what we can, a role model, someone who's living proof that she can have a full, rich life. Maria's face lit up. Actually, I already have someone in mind. My friend Rebecca, she's deaf, she's a certified ASL instructor, and she specializes in teaching young deaf children. I could call her tomorrow if you'd like. Please, Marcus said. And Maria? I'm giving you a raise. A substantial one. This isn't just childcare anymore. You're saving my daughter's life. Our lives. Maria shook her head. The money doesn't matter. This isn't about money for me. What is it about then? Marcus asked. Maria thought about how to answer. When I was 7 and Diego was 2, we were at a playground. Some kids were teasing him, making fun of the sounds he made. He couldn't hear himself, so his vocalizations were different. I saw my baby brother's face crumple, saw him cry, even though he didn't understand why these kids were being mean. She wiped at her eyes. I beat up one of those kids. Got suspended from school for it. My mother was furious, but my father, he took me aside and said, Mija, you can't fight every battle with your fists, but you can fight them with love, with education, with showing the world who Diego really is. Maria looked at Marcus directly. Emma reminds me of Diego at that age. And you remind me of my parents, loving but lost, trying so hard but not sure which direction to go. If I can help you both find your way, then I'm honoring my father's words. I'm fighting the battle with love. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Maria said softly. He passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and meant it. He'd be proud of you, I think. I hope so, Maria said. I hope both our parents, yours and mine, are watching and approving of what we're doing for Emma. The conversation turned to practical matters after that, scheduling with Rebecca, finding a deaf playgroup for Emma, discussing whether to start teaching Emma written English alongside ASL. But something had shifted in their relationship. They weren't just employer and employee anymore. They were partners in Emma's care, united by a common goal, giving this little girl everything she needed to thrive. Later that night, after Maria had gone home, Marcus went to check on Emma one last time. She was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. Marcus sat beside her crib and began to sign, even though she couldn't see him. "I love you, Emma," his hand said. "I'm sorry it took me so long to learn how to tell you properly.
But I'm learning now.
And I'm going to keep learning every day for the rest of your life. You are perfect. You are enough. You are loved exactly as you are." He knew she couldn't see his signs, couldn't receive his message. But he signed anyway, practicing, preparing for the thousands of conversations they would have in the years to come. Conversations in the language that was now theirs, not because it fixed her, but because it connected them. And for the first time since Jennifer died, Marcus felt like he was finally being the father Emma deserved. 3 months after Maria's revelation, the Chun household had become something neither Marcus nor his mother could have imagined. Where there had once been sterile silence punctuated only by medical appointments and desperate research, there was now laughter, conversation, and connection, all conducted in the fluid dance of hands and expressions. Emma's 3rd birthday party was the first true celebration the house had seen since Jennifer's death. But it wasn't the elaborate affair Marcus might have thrown a year ago, complete with vendors and photographers and a quest to make everything normal. Instead, it was intimate, meaningful, and perfectly suited to Emma herself. Rebecca Chun, no relation, though Marcus joked about the coincidence, had become not just Emma's teacher but a cherished presence in their lives. At 32, Rebecca was everything Maria had promised, patient, skilled, and most importantly, a living example of what Emma could become. She was a deaf woman with a master's degree, a thriving career, and an infectious enthusiasm for life. "You know what changed my life?" Rebecca had told Marcus during one of their first meetings, her hands flying as Maria interpreted. "When I was 4, I met my first deaf adult. Until then, I thought being deaf meant being broken because that's what everyone's pity told me. But this woman, Dr. Sarah Martinez, she was a scientist, confident and brilliant and completely comfortable in her deafness. She showed me I could be anything." Marcus had absorbed that lesson. For Emma's birthday, he'd invited not just family friends but members of the local deaf community, deaf adults, families with deaf children, signers of all ages. The living room was full of people, but instead of the usual party chatter, there was the beautiful silence of hands speaking, faces expressing, bodies communicating in 3-dimensional space. Emma was in heaven. She wore a purple dress, her favorite color, which she could now tell anyone who asked, and spent the party moving from person to person, signing with the confidence of a child who finally had language. She told her grandmother about her new book. She asked Rebecca to play with her. She introduced her stuffed rabbit to the other children, signing his name, Mr. Floppy. Marcus watched from the edge of the room, his mother beside him. Both were signing now with moderate fluency, though they still made mistakes and had to fingerspell words they didn't know. "Look at her," Patricia signed to her son, her movements still careful and deliberate. "She's so happy." "Yes," Marcus agreed, his hands forming the simple sign with emotion behind it. A little deaf boy, about Emma's age, approached her with a toy car. Marcus watched as the 2 children began to play, their hands flying in conversation, their faces animated with expression. Emma was laughing, really laughing in a way Marcus realized he'd never seen before. Not because she'd never laughed, but because she'd never had anyone her own age who spoke her language. Maria appeared beside him, carrying a tray of drinks. She'd become more than a maid in these months. She was family, translator, teacher, and friend. "What are you thinking?" she asked, signing as she spoke so Marcus could practice reading signs. Marcus struggled with his response, signing slowly. "I'm thinking I was wrong about everything." Maria waited, patient as always, as he gathered his thoughts and his hands. "I thought her deafness was a tragedy," Marcus continued, mixing signs with spoken words when he didn't know the signs. "I thought I needed to fix it. But look at her, Maria. She's not broken. She never was. I was just speaking the wrong language." "You're speaking the right language now," Maria signed back. "That's what matters." "But I wasted so much time," Marcus said, the guilt still heavy despite Maria's repeated reassurances. An older deaf woman approached them then, Dr. Helen Park, a professor of deaf studies whom Rebecca had introduced to the family. She'd been teaching Marcus about deaf culture and history in their weekly sessions. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to join their conversation. Her signing was beautiful, fluid, expressive in ways Marcus was still learning. "Please," Marcus signed back. "I overheard," Dr. Park signed, her face kind. "You're beating yourself up about the past. Don't." Every parent of a deaf child goes through stages: denial, grief, anger, acceptance. Some get stuck. Some never reach acceptance at all. You're here at Emma's 3rd birthday, signing with deaf adults and celebrating her deaf identity. Do you know how rare that is? Marcus felt his throat tighten. "But the time I lost is gone," Dr. Park interrupted gently. "But Emma is 3. You have her whole childhood ahead of you. Her whole life. You can't change the past, but you can shape her future. And from what I see, you're giving her everything she needs: language, community, acceptance, and most of all, love." She paused, then added, "My parents never learned to sign. Never. I'm 57 years old, and we still communicate through my sister interpreting or through written notes. I would have given anything for what you're giving Emma. So stop grieving the time you lost and celebrate the time you have." Marcus nodded, unable to respond verbally or with his hands because tears were blurring his vision. Dr. Park patted his arm with understanding, then moved away to give him space. Maria touched his shoulder.
"Come on," she signed.
"Emma wants you to help her blow out her candles." They gathered around the cake, a beautiful purple creation with 3 candles. But before lighting them, Marcus did something he'd been planning for weeks. He'd worked with Rebecca to make sure he got it right, had practiced until his hands were sore. He knelt in front of Emma, getting to her eye level, and began to sign a story. Not a simple story, a real one, with characters and conflict and resolution. The story of a little girl who was born into silence, but found her voice through her hands. A girl who was different but perfect. A girl who taught her father how to truly see. Emma watched, rapt, as her father's hands painted pictures in the air. The other children gathered around, and their parents too, all watching this man who 3 months ago couldn't sign a single word, now telling his daughter a story in her language. When he finished, Emma signed back. "Again, Daddy. Tell again." Marcus laughed, tears streaming down his face, and signed. "Later. Now, we celebrate you." They lit the candles, and though Emma couldn't hear them, everyone in the room sang "Happy Birthday" in sign language, hands opening and closing for the clapping rhythm, everyone's faces showing the joy of celebration. Emma watched them all, her eyes wide with delight, and blew out her candles with a force that scattered wax across the cake. As the party continued and children ran around playing, Marcus found himself in conversation with a deaf couple, Thomas and Jennifer. Marcus had smiled sadly at the name Coincidence, who had a 5-year-old deaf daughter. We heard about Emma from Rebecca, Thomas signed, with Jennifer interpreting vocally for Marcus's benefit. About how you're learning to sign, embracing the deaf community. That's wonderful. I'm trying. Marcus signed back carefully. Still learning. We all are, Jennifer signed. Even those of us who are deaf. But can I give you some advice? Marcus nodded eagerly. Don't lose sight of who Emma is outside of her deafness, Jennifer continued. Yes, she's deaf. That's important. It shapes how she experiences the world. But she's also a 3-year-old girl who likes purple and rabbits and making messes. Sometimes parents get so focused on the deaf part that they forget the kid part. Thomas added, Our daughter is deaf, but she's also bossy and dramatic and obsessed with dinosaurs. Those things matter just as much as her deafness. Marcus absorbed this, thinking about how he'd been viewing Emma. Had he overcorrected? Gone from ignoring her deafness to making it the only thing he saw? How do you balance it, he asked. Acknowledging her deafness while also just letting her be a kid? You just live, Jennifer signed simply. You accommodate her needs without making her needs her whole identity. You teach her to be proud of being deaf while also teaching her to be kind, brave, honest. All the things you'd teach any child. It was such simple wisdom, but it resonated deeply with Marcus. Emma was deaf. She was also stubborn like him, creative like her mother, affectionate, curious, sometimes frustratingly independent. The deafness was part of her, not all of her. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, each one said goodbye to Emma in sign. She responded to each, her little hands forming thank yous and goodbyes and see you soons. When the last guest left, Emma was exhausted but glowing. Maria began cleaning up while Patricia took Emma to change into pajamas. Marcus helped Maria, signing as he picked up discarded plates.
Thank you, he signed.
For all of this. For seeing what I couldn't see. For having the courage to do what was right even when it was hard. You would have figured it out eventually, Maria signed back. You love her too much not to have found your way. Maybe, Marcus conceded. But maybe not in time. Maybe I would have wasted years, decades, trying to fix something that wasn't broken. He paused, finding the words carefully. I want to tell you something. I've been thinking about it for weeks, and I want to do it right. Maria looked at him curiously, waiting. I'm setting up a foundation, Marcus signed and spoke. For deaf children and their families. To provide free sign language instruction, to connect families with the deaf community, to fund research into deaf education, not cures but education, to help other families avoid the mistakes I made. Maria's eyes widened. Marcus, that's. And I want you to help run it, he continued. Not as staff, as a partner. You understand what these families need in a way I never will. Your voice, your perspective is invaluable. I don't have the credentials, Maria protested. I'm not a teacher, Nada. You're someone who sees clearly, Marcus interrupted. Someone who cares deeply. Someone who had the courage to risk her job to do what was right for a child who needed her. That's more valuable than any credential. Maria was crying now, and Marcus realized he was too. You gave me my daughter back, Marcus signed, his movements shaky with emotion. Let me give this to other families. Let's give them what you gave me. Hope, connection, and a path forward. Maria nodded, unable to sign through her tears. They stood there in the debris of the birthday party, this grieving billionaire and this brave young woman, united by their love for a little girl who had changed both their lives. Upstairs, Emma was already asleep, Mr. Floppy tucked under her arm, dreams playing across her peaceful face. Dreams that came in pictures and feelings and perhaps in some way Marcus would never fully understand, in the beautiful, flowing language of hands. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Marcus sat in his office reviewing the plans for the Jennifer Chin Foundation for Deaf Children. The irony wasn't lost on him, his late wife's name on a foundation that supported exactly what she had suggested 2 years ago. If Jennifer were here, she would have laughed at his stubbornness, then kissed him and said she was proud he'd finally figured it out. The foundation was scheduled to launch in 3 weeks. They'd already hired a staff of 12, including 3 deaf educators, a director of family services, Maria, who'd quit her position as Emma's nanny to take on this new role, though she still spent every afternoon with Emma, and Rebecca as the chief educational consultant. But this morning, Marcus wasn't thinking about the foundation. He was preparing for something far more important: Emma's first day at the Center for Deaf Education, a bilingual school where deaf and hearing children learn together in both ASL and English. Emma was 3.5 now, and watching her develop had been the greatest joy and education of Marcus's life. She was signing in complex sentences, had started learning written English, and had recently begun asking questions about her mother. Questions Marcus could now actually answer because they shared a language. Mama in heaven? Emma had signed last week, sitting on Marcus's lap while they looked at photo albums. Yes, sweetheart. Marcus had signed back, his hands steady despite the ache in his heart. Mama died. She's not coming back. But she loved you so much. So much. Emma had processed this with the seriousness of a child encountering profound truth. Then she'd signed. Mama see me? In heaven. Marcus had nodded, signing. I think so. I think she sees how brave and smart and kind you are. I think she's proud of you. Like Daddy proud? Emma had asked. Even more, Marcus had signed, pulling her close. Now, preparing for Emma's first day of school, Marcus felt Jennifer's absence acutely. She should be here for this. She should be helping Emma pick out her backpack, taking first-day photos, signing excited encouragement. But she wasn't, and never would be again. Marcus had learned to carry grief differently in these months. Not as a weight that crushed him, but as a companion that walked beside him. Heavy some days, lighter others, but always present. Therapy had helped. So had the deaf parent support group Maria had encouraged him to join. So had learning to be present for Emma instead of lost in his quest to change her. Daddy ready? Emma's small voice, her literal voice, broke into his thoughts. She was standing in his office doorway, wearing her new purple dress and the backpack they'd picked out together, signing as she made sounds. Emma vocalized sometimes, though her sounds didn't form words. Speech therapy was available if she ever wanted to pursue it, but for now, signing was her language, and Marcus had no intention of forcing her to be anything other than who she was. Almost ready, sweetheart. Marcus signed back. Where's Maria? Kitchen. Emma signed. Making lunch special. Marcus smiled. Maria had insisted on making Emma's first lunch. Not the kind the school cafeteria served, but Emma's favorites lovingly prepared. Even though Maria was now the foundation's director of family services, with a salary that shocked her parents and an office in Marcus's building, she'd taken the morning off for this milestone. They found Maria in the kitchen, carefully packing sandwiches cut into stars, apple slices, and the special cookies she'd learned to make from her mother's recipe. Patricia was there too, having arrived early to see Emma off. Pictures? Patricia signed with the enthusiasm of a grandmother. Many pictures before we go. They took photos, Emma with her backpack, Emma with Marcus, Emma with Maria, Emma with both of them. Patricia took so many that Emma began to protest, signing. Enough. School now. The drive to the school was short but felt eternal. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Emma, who was signing to Mr. Floppy, apparently explaining what school would be like. Maria sat beside him, providing a calm presence as always. Nervous? She signed at a stoplight. Terrified, Marcus admitted. What if she doesn't like it? What if the other kids are mean? What if? What if she has a wonderful time and makes friends and loves learning? Maria interrupted. That's also possible, you know. Marcus smiled despite his nerves. When did you become the optimistic one? When you started becoming the worrying one, Maria signed back. We balance each other out. They did, Marcus realized. In the past 6 months, their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had quite named. She wasn't his employee anymore. She wasn't quite family, but more than a friend. She was essential. And sometimes, late at night when he was alone, Marcus wondered if she felt the same pull he did, the same awareness that something was shifting between them. But those thoughts were for another time. Today was about Emma. The Center for Deaf Education was a revelation. Unlike the sterile medical facilities Marcus had spent so many hours in, this was vibrant with color and life. Visual alarms flashed instead of bells. Signs in both English and ASL covered the walls. And everywhere, there were hands speaking. Emma's eyes went wide. Marcus knelt beside her, signing, See? Everyone here speaks your language. You're going to love it here. Everyone. Emma signed, looking around in wonder. Everyone, Marcus confirmed. Emma's teacher, Miss Sarah Chun, no relation. Marcus was starting to think Chun was the Smith of the deaf community, was a young deaf woman with a warm smile and animated signing style. She welcomed Emma with such genuine enthusiasm that the little girl, usually shy with strangers, responded immediately. We're going to have so much fun this year. Miss Sarah signed to Emma. Do you want to see your classroom? Meet some friends? Emma looked back at Marcus uncertainly. He gave her an encouraging smile and signed. It's okay. I'll pick you up at 3 o'clock. Have fun, be brave. Love you, Daddy, Emma signed. Love you too, sweetheart. Marcus signed back, the familiar gesture now as natural as breathing. He watched Emma take Miss Sarah's hand and walk into the classroom, where other children were already playing. A deaf boy approached Emma immediately, signing something that made her laugh. Just like that, she was engaged, already making connections. Marcus felt Maria's hand on his arm. She's going to be fine. Maria signed with her free hand. I know, Marcus signed back. It's just she's growing up. She doesn't need me as much anymore. She'll always need you, Maria assured him. Just in different ways. That's how it's supposed to work. They stood there for a moment, watching through the classroom window as Emma settled into a circle of children for morning meeting. Then, reluctantly, Marcus turned to leave. In the car, alone with Maria for the first time in a while, no Emma, no Patricia, no foundation staff, Marcus felt the weight of everything that had changed in the past 9 months. I need to tell you something, he said and signed simultaneously, having grown comfortable enough to do both. Maria turned to him, curious. What? Marcus took a breath. When you first came to work for us, I was barely functioning. I was lost in my grief, obsessed with fixing Emma, unable to see what was right in front of me. You changed everything. Not just for Emma, but for me too. Marcus. Maria began, but he continued. Let me finish, he signed. Please. I've been thinking about this for months, trying to figure out the right time, the right words. I don't know if there's a right time, so I'm just going to say it. He turned to face her fully, his hands forming words with more care than any business presentation had ever received. I care about you, Maria. Not just as Emma's teacher, not just as a colleague on the foundation, but as the woman who had the courage to do what was right even when it was hard. as the person who sees me, really sees me, with all my flaws and mistakes, as someone I want in my life, in Emma's life, in whatever form that takes. Maria's eyes were wide, her hands still. I'm not asking for anything, Marcus continued quickly. I know I'm your employer, technically, even though you don't work for me at the house anymore. I know it's complicated. I know I'm a widower with a deaf daughter and more baggage than any person should reasonably carry. I needed you to know. I needed to be honest. For a long moment, Maria didn't respond. Then, slowly, her hands began to move. Do you know why I took this job? She signed. Why I stayed even when it was hard, even when you were difficult, even when I was risking everything to teach Emma behind your back. Marcus shook his head. Because I saw you, Maria signed. I saw a man broken by grief, trying desperately to save his daughter, the only way he knew how. I saw someone who loved so much it was destroying him. And I thought if I could help, if I could make things even a little bit better, then maybe my father's death would mean something. Her hands trembled slightly. My father died because he couldn't afford good health care. We had no money, no connections, no power to save him. And then I met you. Someone with all the money and power in the world, but unable to save what mattered most to him. And I realized that what Emma needed, what you needed, wasn't money or power. It was just love, and understanding, and someone to show you the way. Maria, Marcus whispered. I care about you too, she signed, her eyes meeting his. I have for months. But I was afraid of crossing boundaries, afraid of taking advantage, afraid of losing what we have. And we do have something, Marcus. We have Emma and the foundation and this beautiful thing we've built together. I don't want to risk that. Neither do I, Marcus signed. But I also don't want to pretend I don't feel this. We don't have to rush anything. We don't have to change anything right now. I just needed you to know. They sat in the car outside the school, hands speaking what voices couldn't quite convey, understanding passing between them in the language they'd both learned for Emma's sake. Finally, Maria signed. Let's take it slow. Let's see where this goes naturally.
But Marcus?
I'm glad you told me. I'm glad we're being honest. Me too, Marcus signed. They drove to the foundation offices together, discussing plans for the upcoming launch, but something had shifted. A door had opened, just a crack, to possibilities neither of them had fully acknowledged before. That afternoon, when they picked Emma up from school, she was bursting with stories. She'd made 3 friends. She'd learned a new song in sign language. She'd painted a picture of Mr. Floppy. She'd had the best day ever. Marcus and Maria listened to every detail, asking questions, celebrating this milestone with the same enthusiasm Emma showed. And when they got home, when Marcus carried a tired Emma upstairs for her nap, he found Maria in the living room, looking at the photo wall he'd created, pictures of Jennifer, of Emma as a baby, of the family they'd been. She would have liked you, Marcus said, coming to stand beside her. Jennifer. She would have approved of all of this. The foundation. Emma's school.
You.
Maria smiled sadly. I wish I could have known her. In a way, you do, Marcus said. Emma has her smile, her determination, her kindness. Every day, I see Jennifer in our daughter. And every day, I'm grateful that Emma has you to help her become whoever she's meant to be. They stood together, looking at the pictures, honoring the past while acknowledging the present. And upstairs, Emma slept peacefully, a little girl who had been born into silence, but had found her voice, her language, her place in the world. 3 weeks later, at the launch of the Jennifer Chin Foundation for Deaf Children, Marcus stood before a crowd of donors, families, educators, and community members. Emma sat in the front row between Maria and Patricia, all three of them wearing purple, Emma's favorite color, which had become the foundation's signature. Marcus's speech was translated into ASL by Rebecca, projected on large screens so everyone could follow along. 9 months ago, Marcus began, I thought I knew what my daughter needed. I thought she needed to be fixed, to be made normal, to hear like everyone else. I was wrong. He paused, looking at Emma, who was watching the screen intently. What she needed was language,
Community.
acceptance, and someone brave enough to show me the truth I couldn't see. My late wife Jennifer understood this before I did. This foundation is named in her honor, but it exists because of the courage of one person who refused to let my daughter remain isolated in silence. He gestured to Maria, who looked surprised and moved. The Jennifer Chin Foundation exists to serve deaf children and their families, not by trying to fix them, but by giving them the tools to thrive exactly as they are. We will provide free ASL classes to families. We will connect deaf children with deaf mentors. We will advocate for better education, better accommodations, better understanding. We will celebrate deafness as difference, not disability. The crowd applauded, hearing people clapping, deaf people raising their hands and shaking them in the ASL version of applause. And we will do this, Marcus concluded, because every child deserves what my daughter has now, a language to express themselves, a community that understands them, and a family that loves them exactly as they are. Thank you. As the crowd rose in standing ovation, Emma climbed onto Maria's lap and signed to her father across the room. Proud of you, Daddy. Marcus signed back, tears streaming down his face. Proud of you too, sweetheart. So proud. That night, after the celebration, after all the congratulations and speeches and champagne toasts, Marcus tucked Emma into bed. She was exhausted but happy, clutching Mr. Floppy and already half asleep. Daddy, she signed sleepily. Happy. Marcus smiled, signing back. Very happy, sweetheart. Are you happy? Emma nodded, then signed something that made Marcus's heart overflow. Love, Daddy. Love, Maria. Love, Grandma. Love my life. I love your life too, Marcus signed. Sleep well, my beautiful girl. As Emma drifted off, Marcus stood in her doorway, watching her sleep the way he had so many times before. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't looking at a problem to be solved or a condition to be cured. He was looking at his daughter, brilliant, bilingual, beloved, and exactly perfect as she was. Maria appeared beside him, her presence as natural as breathing now. You did good today, she signed. We did good, Marcus corrected. All of us together. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Emma sleep, this little girl who had been born deaf and had, in the process of finding her own voice, taught her father how to truly listen. Not with his ears, but with his eyes, his hands, his heart. Outside Emma's window, the New York skyline glittered with lights, a city of noise that Emma would never hear but would experience in her own vibrant, visual, beautiful way. And in this penthouse apartment that had once been filled with grief and desperate silence, there was now something better than sound. There was understanding. There was love. There was home. The end.